Cirian Villavicencio is the governor's appointee. All right, and he is going to give the last messages for us. Okay. Cirian, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's been a long day, but it's been a wonderful day. I think so. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll make it really, really quick here. Distinguished guests, again, honored veterans, it is indeed a privilege to stand before you today as your concluding speaker. Like many of you, I also have a family member who served in World War II. My paternal grandfather was part of USAFI, was a survivor of the Bataan Death March. But before I continue on my comments, again, just real brief, I want to thank Cecilia Garland and the Bataan Historical Legacy Society and all of the volunteers for putting this very important conference together for our benefit. So if we could just have one final round of applause for everyone who put that together. So briefly, as I thought about what I would say for my closing remarks today, my mind seemed to circle back to the word sacrifice, and appropriately so, because we have seen that word expressed today and throughout all of the presentations. And so that being said, speaking to the veterans directly, the reason why we gathered here today is because of your sacrifice, and really those who are no longer with us who gave the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedoms. All of us, I think, know that freedom will never be free, and it was never free, and it will never be free. It needs to be fought for, it needs to be won, and therefore it must be valued and cherished. In this country, we have the freedom, because of your sacrifices, the freedom to worship according to the dictates of our conscience. We have the freedom of speech. We have the right to petition government for any grievance. And we know there are many more rights written in the Bill of Rights in our U.S. Constitution. But there is another aspect to exercising our freedom that I feel many neglect, and that is our responsibility to remember and to know the history from whence these sacrifices were born that paved the way for us to allow to have these freedoms. The great Filipino revolutionary Jose Rizal famously said, quote, "He who does not know how to look back at where he came will never get to his destination," unquote. That quotation reminds us that those of you who have borne that sacrifice, as you've done today, have a moral obligation to share your stories. And we, as the younger generation, have the obligation to listen, to remember, and to pass those stories onto our posterity. As a community, it is imperative that these stories remain alive. But our stories should not be kept only for ourselves. We also have an obligation as a Filipino-American community to fight for the right to have our stories and our history known and told. For we are also an important part of the fabric of this diverse tapestry of this great American history. As you veterans know, one cannot win battles by remaining passive. It requires sacrifice, determination, and ultimately action that moves us forward. There is a mission, right, that needs to be achieved. And using that as a metaphor in the battlefield of politics, we cannot afford to remain passive. War and politics were never a spectator sport. It requires action and civic engagement. We must speak boldly of our accomplishments. And so, with that said, I call on each and every one of us, including myself, to take inspiration from the bravery and sacrifice of our veterans. And if you think about it in a deep and in a very profound way, they have already showed us through their heroic and valiant actions the meaning of sacrifice and how to win. Speaking to our younger generation, we already have the greatest role models, our veterans, and how privileged we are today to have them in our midst. And so let me conclude by referencing Rizal's quotation once again, but in its contrapositive, which I think is very powerful. Quote, "One will always reach his destination when he is able to look back from where he came." The purpose of today, the purpose of this conference was to look back at our proud history, and I think we did so successfully today. Therefore, I am confident we will ultimately reach our destination. Thank you. One last point before we dismiss. Ray told me to mention this. How then do we engage civically here? You can check out, number one, the World War II exhibit at the Veterans War Memorial Trophy Room. That's open until December 15th. You can volunteer to be a docent for that exhibit. You can help us build our coalition, share your family history, story, and legacy with us. Loan us your family World War II artifacts, photos, and documents. Clearly make a financial donation. Like us again on Facebook. And one last point, because General Taguba, whom I'm working with the Congressional Gold Medal, I would like you to also visit philvetsrep.org. That is where we need to persuade our members of Congress, specifically the House Republican leadership, to bring this bill to the floor, because we've already received the votes that we need. It just takes a few more letters and a few more phone calls to get this bill to the president's desk. Thank you very much.